Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, your packed snapshot on the week's biggest business stories, their context, relevance and impact. I'm Govindraj, Ethiraj. The International Monetary Fund has projected India's GDP growth for 2014-15 at 5.6%, a notch above its earlier prediction of 5.4% made in July this year. The IMF's World Economic Outlook released this week says India has recovered from a relative slump partly due to effective policies and a renewal of confidence. The IMF has predicted India's GDP to grow by 6.4% in 2015. The report says the Indian economy expanded by 5% last year after experiencing sub-5% growth in the last 1.5 years. In its global outlook, the IMF says China is expected to experience some moderation in its GDP growth as the report predicts it to come down to 7.4% this year and 7.1% next year. Now, the Chinese economy grew by 7.7% in the last 2 years. Now, global growth for 2014 is projected at 3.3%, 0.4 percentage points lower than what it had predicted in the World Economic Outlook in April this year. Joining me to understand what this means are Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, Professor at ICRIER, and Dr. Ajay, former Secretary of the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. Dr. Dua, thank you very much, and Arpita, thank you very much. Dr. Dua, let me begin with you. I know there is a 0.2% increase, and therefore we must be happy. But is that what it really means?
Yes, I think hiking up the estimate by 20 basis points is significant because it's actually saying we are coming out of a slump. Recovery is, some shoots of recovery are being seen, and that post-December 2014, there should be a significant jump in the economic rate of growth because it's coming to 6.4% in 2016. So I think we should all, as Indians, be happy that it's being recognized by the IMF. And the issues which the IMF has pointed out which need to be addressed, we should take them seriously. And I think we should then be on a steady part of growth.
So amongst the issues the IMF has pointed out, which of course include infrastructure hurdles, issues to do with labor and education reforms and so on, what is your point, or the point that you feel is most critical at this point?
To my mind, right now a lot has happened because there is a change of mood in the country. Confidence amongst the investors, confidence amongst the business people, both are based outside India and in India. Now, a lot of this confidence can be sustained if actually things start happening on the ground. We've spent the last few months probably understanding or prioritizing the issues, and now it's time for action. Certainly, some of these would have to be big ticket as well. Small ones are important.
And I'll come to those action points in a moment. Dr. Mukherjee, what are you taking away from this? Is this as good as it seems to sound?
Yeah, it is not bad. Basically, it is looking into how the world looks into India, and the world finds India to have a more stable government at the center. And there is a boost towards manufacturing by the present government with the Make in India and other strategies. So they do see positive signals happening. And this is quite nice for India because this is despite the fact that we have not signed the trade facilitation agreement. There were some problems in the ASEAN agreement signing. So given that we have not done too much externally, it still shows that there is a global confidence in the country.
Right. So the global confidence and the sense that there has been a renewal or a turnaround within India is what's leading to that 0.2% increase. No, but that's only the beginning, right? So what needs to be done beyond this now?
See, there are a couple of, if you can do, just rate them, there are a couple of things which can be done very easily, and there are a couple of things which will take time. You know, even in infrastructure, there can be some projects which can be completed very quickly by giving the clearances, and the way the environmental clearances are happening is what is making many people happy, including foreign investors. Then the projects relating to economic corridors and other, a kind of a vision to have a development in a planned way is what is encouraging the foreign investors and the growth projection.
Right. Right. Dr. Dua, let me come to you. What are we, I mean, you said that some of this has to start getting converted into action, and there is already some impatience, right? People are expecting some faster statements or actual decisions. What's your sense?
I fully agree with that. As I just mentioned, last 4 months or so, considerable groundwork has been done. Now, at least those issues on which we do not need parliamentary approval, that means which are not legislative in nature, I think through the executive action, a lot of things can be done.
Okay. Give us an example.
Ease of doing business, let me just look at those. 4 or 5 issues have been highlighted which have actually slid India down to 134th position. A lot of these pertain to action on the ground at the state level. It doesn't require parliamentary approval. It's action at the state level on how do you deal with giving permissions for construction, for instance. I don't think any law is required to expedite according of construction permits. It is within the hands of the municipal bodies, and the municipal bodies all report to the state governments and are financially hugely dependent upon the state governments. I think the governments need to incentivize the municipal bodies through this or leverage their economic financial strength vis-a-vis.
Right. So create an incentive structure so therefore states who may or may not be with you actually start moving on some of these things. Okay, that's number one.
Number two is enforcing contracts. That's been highlighted. Now, enforcing contracts is again an implementation issue. No one is saying that our laws are inadequate or laws are overbearing in terms of. It is a question of ensuring that we have a process, we have a channel where civil contracts do not get delayed or get mixed up with a whole lot of other civil litigation, which is there before the courts.
Right.
So we would need to fast track litigation or enforcement of contracts. But to start with, we could do it merely between Indians and foreign investors.
Okay.
That a second track is open, that if a foreign investor is finding difficulty in enforcing contracts, there is an avenue. It could be purely judicial. It need not be executive because it's a question of
Right. So you're saying in some ways these are the low-hanging fruits which must be addressed immediately.
Yeah.
Dr. Mukherjee, you know, the IMF's 2016 estimate is 6.4%. Is that something that will automatically come, or is there hard work, and therefore, if so, what are your concerns?
One of the things that they would like to look into is what Dr. Dua said about ease of doing business, and that not only leads, not only we need to focus on creation of infrastructure, it is actually we need to focus on more logistics and running of the existing infrastructure much more efficiently. The other thing that companies would really look into is some kind of a tax reforms. You know, what happens to GST? Now they are thinking that this would happen, and now what happens to the retrospect tax? Is it withdrawn? Will it be there? Will MAT exemptions continue? Will it be withdrawn? What would be the government's position? Now, if you talk to industry, we at ICRIER did talk to a lot of industries, and the industry says they don't need any incentives or schemes. Today, there are over 100 incentives and schemes. Most of them are WTO non-compliant if India actually moves into an Annex 7 country. What industry needs is to compile all of them into a single kind of kind of a scheme which actually gives you a little bit of ease of doing business and facilitates more of a governance structure can be streamlined. Like you, instead of having multiple clearances, let us do it through a common body, a common, single window kind of a system.
Right. Dr. Dua, is there also therefore, I mean, from what I can sense from what both of you are saying, is that an implicit statement that we may not be actually able to do some of the big ticket things, at least in the near future?
If some of these are going to be requiring parliamentary approval, I'm not quite sure, given the complexion of the Rajya Sabha, how much time it would take to get these things past the Rajya Sabha. Because we've seen in the case of insurance bill, something which was espoused by the Congress itself, by the UPA, when it's now in the opposition, this very bill which it had been wanting, enhancing the limit from 26% to 49%, it's requiring that to be referred to a select
So
committee.
that's a legislative procedure.
Yes.
What about actual on-ground manufacturing, increase in output, jobs?
I think a lot of these can happen, can be done. All that we need, as was referred to, is one, amongst the low-hanging fruits are looking at capacities which have been created but not commissioned. Just to give you an example of the power sector, which even the IMF report talks about, what do we need? It's the last-minute kind of hurdles. One, giving a fuel linkage. If you do not have coal blocks to give them, or if you do not have gas to give them, please make arrangements for import. After all, the fuel is now a pass-through. You know, if the Supreme Court judgment finally gets accepted in the UNPP, it will be passed on. So that developers have put in their money. They are waiting for the fuel to be granted to them. They couldn't care less whether it's through an asset allocation or it's a flow allocation.
Right. Okay. So you're saying focus on, to use the IMF's words, infrastructure hurdles in areas like power.
Yeah, similarly, and roads. There are a lot of roads which are nearing completion, but the disputes between the NHAI and the bodies the developers have held up granting them the COD date, as they call them, commissioning dates, from when they can levy the toll charges, etc. Again, on procedural issues.
Okay.
What are the procedural issues? Just to give you a sense of it, number of places developers are saying that you were required to give us the land. Unless you gave the land to us in full, we could not commission the project. So now, if you have given the land to us in pieces, there is bound to be some delay in completion. Please recognize those.
Right.
So these are again roads ready, but last minute not being commissioned, etc. fully because there are some procedural difficulties.
Right. And I think that pretty much sums up what both of you are saying, which is that if we were to address the nitty-gritties and really roll up sleeves, get down to the shop floor, and most of these issues will be solved, and then we get down to the big stuff that may actually address the larger targets that IMF is setting. Thank you very much. We need to go in for a break, but we'll come back on the other side. You're with Policy Watch. Welcome back to Policy Watch. India's biggest e-tailer Flipkart's mega sale on the 6th of October created headlines for several reasons. The company claimed it sold goods and products worth over 600 crore rupees in a single day. But there was a definite flip side in the technical glitches, server outages, payment problems, and customer complaints of overcharging. Some customers expressed disappointment at the highly discounted products that were used to lure them to the retailer's website, which went out of stock minutes after the sale began. Now, Flipkart faced criticism on social networking sites for low inventory of highly discounted products that were heavily advertised to lure them. Some complained that the company earlier inflated prices to show discounts on the day of the mega sale. The company's founders, Sachin and Binny Bansal, later apologized to registered users through an email. Other retailing companies like Snapdeal, eBay India and Amazon India also saw increased traffic on their sites on the day as many users checked on offerings by rival companies. Traditional retailers facing stiff competition from e-retailing companies complained to the Commerce Minister over predatory pricing and the lack of regulation over such sites, according to them. The Confederation of All India Traders, CAIT, demanded a probe into the business model and trade practices of e-commerce companies to find out how they are offering huge discounts during this ongoing festival season.
एक साल के अंदर लास्ट ईयर जब हमने दसरा का सेल किया था और ये साल दसरा का सेल में 30% का ड्रॉप है। उसमें जो हाई सेगमेंट का मोबाइल है उसका सबसे ज़्यादा ड्रॉप हुआ है। जो 1000, 2000, 5000 का कस्टमर तो अभी भी ऑफलाइन में परचेस कर रहा है, लेकिन 10,000 के जब ऊपर जाता है तो आधा कस्टमर ऑफलाइन में लेता है, उसको अभी भी भरोसा नहीं है क्योंकि आफ्टर सेल सर्विस का उसको डाउट रहता है करके, और बाकी का 50% जाके वो खरीद ले रहा है, जो यूथ है परचेस कर रहा है वो।
Right. Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has promised to look into the concerns raised by the traditional retailers. Now, joining me to discuss the fallout and impact of this are Dr. Ajay, former Secretary of the Minister of Industry for Commerce, and Praveen Khandelwal, Secretary General of the Confederation of All India Traders. Dr. Dua, let me first ask you, in your time, was something like this ever envisaged, the clash between the e-tailing model and the traditional retail model?
It may not have been envisaged in the way it's cropped up a couple of days.
And hence we're not in a way ready from a policy and regulatory point of view.
I would concede that. But at the same time, I'd like to say that what the government was ready for when it allowed these things to happen was that we are moving towards an open market price mechanism, where the government withdraws from setting pricing, including offering of discounts. There are regulators to look at things, including the Competition Commission of India, to look at whether predatory pricing has been undertaken, whether there is an abuse of dominant position, etc. Since those were in position, the government probably did not specifically look at such complaints of this nature arising and
Right.
what sort of cognizance should be taken of those.
Right. So, Praveen Khandelwal, let me ask you this question. So, this seems to be obviously an attempt to lure customers at a certain period of time by offering discounts. Now, this may not last, I mean, for various reasons. So, why should the Confederation of Retailers be then concerned if something like this cannot ever be sustained?
See, the basic issue is we have to understand their business model. And I am totally unable to understand as to how a seller who is selling a certain commodity at a certain price today, the day next he is selling at such a lower price, and the very next day he comes back to the original price. So that means the difference between the original price and the offered price, who put money for that? Whether it was subsidized by the company, or it was a collusion with the manufacturer, or with whom? This is the basic question. We are not afraid of any competition. Rather, we welcome competition and we welcome the online trade. But certainly there should be a fair practice, and there should be there should be a fair play and equal level playing field. Then only you can ensure a good business atmosphere in the country.
Right. So, is your concern more with the manufacturers, the large manufacturers, particularly in the context of electronics products, or is it something that has to be taken to the government? Because Dr. Dua is saying that the government has created the broader regulatory structure to handle anything in the nature of unusual competition or unfair competition or trade practices.
See, the basic issue is that the CCI, what Mr. Dua is talking about, is not taking any suo motu cognizance of the issue. And really, there is a drop of business to the tune from 20% to 35% in offline market in certain major categories. So if these things are not looked into, then the offline retailers are at a proposition of loss. So that is why we have complained to the Commerce Minister, and she has assured us to take a cognizance.
Right. So, what would you expect her to do, or what would you expect the government to do, Praveen?
See, I feel that since e-commerce is an emerging market and a easy place, so and as on date, it is a free for all. There is no regulations for e-commerce business. So we have requested the government to constitute a regulatory authority to regulate and monitor the e-commerce business in India. And secondly, since we cannot understand the price methodology being adopted by these online retailers, so therefore we have demanded the government to investigate their entire business module, which includes the taxation procedure also. Because at the front of taxation, what these people are doing, that one company is being registered in one state, whereas they are delivering the material all across the country.
Right.
And that too without charging CST.
Right.
So,
and this is the same issue that Amazon has faced in the United States. I mean, and versus offline retailers too, tax as well as offline retailers. I'll come back to you in a second. Dr. Deo, what's the way forward for this? I mean, how does finally the consumer is very happy. I think that we cannot deny.
Except for the various
Those
technical glitches, which are kind
so
of
that they might fix, that they'll fix.
Yeah, and they need to be.
Yeah.
They should have proper inventory. They should be in a position to deliver on the day which they had promised. So somewhere they found that they didn't expect such a response, or if they did, they hadn't backed it up with real physical strength to deal with the queries.
My question is, what lands at the door of the Commerce Ministry, and what should the Commerce Ministry be?
I think the Commerce Ministry has to be concerned about the welfare of the consumer as much as the welfare of the provider. It has to, like any government, balance both the interests.
Okay.
If within the scheme of things, e-commerce, e-retailers are conducting themselves, I think then it will be merely an issue of taxation, which each state government concerned has to look at, whether it's the VAT which is payable or it's the CST which is payable, a point which is raised. This will be for the state governments to look at. And if it's a question of predominance or dominance of the market being used, then you have a competition commission to look at. To my mind, the concern of the retailers is legitimate because they weren't prepared, saying here is an industry which today has less than 1% of the share of the organized market at 4 billion versus 500 billion.
And no, it's legitimate from their point of view, but they should have been prepared, isn't it?
No, they probably did not expect that when the sales are starting, that a particular vendor
the onslaught was something that perhaps no one was ready for.
$100 million business he could do on a particular day. So they are seeing the potential of that business growing and how it could be impeding their growth.
Right.
So that's a legitimate concern. But I think it will need to be seen in a very larger interest that you got to make sure that the consumer does not get at the short end of the scheme of things, because you have provided a platform in which most retailers are not inventorizing. They are only providing a platform to the manufacturer or a distributor to distribute the goods. So if that vendor or the manufacturer is willing to take a hit,
then why not? Yeah. Okay, Praveen, yes, go ahead.
I have a point here. I fully agree with Mr. Dua. When they are the technology provider and they are not the owners of the inventory, then what right they have got to announce sale? They are not the owners of the inventory. I am the owner. So but they don't have any right.
So, but from a consumer's point of view, it's very simple. If I'm getting a better deal...
As far as the consumer is concerned, we are very happy because at many places I am also consumer. So we are not blaming consumer. But the point is, by giving such kind of, by undertaking such kind of practices, you are converting consumer into a certain behavior. So we need consumer on its own. Consumer is not going. You are prompting consumer to go to online because online is cheaper than the offline market.
Right. So
and why it is happening, we need to understand. And if really after investigation, if it is found that they have not violated any law or something like that, and they are not being funded unethically, we don't have any problem. It is always the consumer-driven market.
Right. So, Praveen, we all know that it is, I mean, e-commerce is going to grow in a country like India, like it has in America, like it has in China. I mean, you have very good examples there. So, what is your strategy going forward? I mean, obviously this, by only complaining to the commerce minister or only, pointing out the problem.
It is not like that. Already since last more than 1 year, through our CAIT retail school, we have already launched a nationwide movement within our trading community. We are asking our traders to open their shop online also. So it is not that we are against online. We are against the unethical practices being advocated and used by the online retailers.
Right.
That is it.
Okay, got it. Dr. Dua, what's your last word on this subject? Where should we take this now?
I think the growth, as you said, e-retailing is inevitable. You are going into a digital revolution in the country. The more you digitize the economy...
And that's the government's sort of avowed objective as well.
Absolutely. And you're going to see more and more of this.
Yeah.
We must make sure that what the e-retailers do is legitimate. It is not something which they are doing for the sake of getting a market share and thereafter increasing their rates, etc., as was an accusation made against Amazon in the US initially, and it had to, and again about the taxation issues, etc., they would have to as the size of the cake is becoming larger, become legitimate dealers, legitimate retailers. But at the same time, I think the message for the organized retail is very loud and clear. They would have to learn to live with this situation and at the same time they may
adapt.
also have to streamline their own operations.
Right. We've run out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Dua. Thank you very much, Praveen. That's all we have time for on Policy Watch this week. We'll be back next week, same time. Thanks for watching.